Well, shalom, everybody. We're getting ready to start Midrash on Torah portion Bo. But before we do that, we have enjoyed some food. So the scripture tells us, "So you'll eat and be satisfied, and you'll bless Adonai your God for the good land He has given these." We thank you for the land. It's in Yeshua's name that we thank you. Amen. We are again in Torah portion Bo. And so a frequent question we ask at the beginning of our studies of portions is, according to the numbers, if you will, or most sources in this case, how many mitzvot are in this portion? Is it A, 66, B, 33, C, 25, or D, 20?
I guess 20.
Jim guesses 20. Earl guesses B, 33. All right. Well, the correct answer is, ta-da, it in fact is 20. Jim's doing a little dance here, a victory dance. Just kidding. So let's take a look at some of the mitzvot in the portion. Starting in chapter 12 is where the mitzvot begins. Earl says that Jim's always right, so he
I agree.
he concurs. So, chapter 12, verse 2 is the Torah of Rosh Chodesh, or new moon. Most of the mitzvot in this portion are regarding or concerned with the Passover, the Torah of the slaughter of the Pesach. So, just as a point of note, clarification perhaps, the word Pesach, it really isn't referring to, well, it's not directly referring to the day or the ceremony. It's referring to the animal itself. The Pesach is the lamb. Certainly there are, when you think of Pesach as a day, it's the day of the Pesach offering. But the Pesach we're talking about is literally, it's the lamb. So it's the Pesach slaughter, Pesach eating the Pesach lamb, how not to, essentially how not to cook it. You don't eat it boiled or raw. You don't allow the meat to wait until morning.
Don't fry it in Crisco.
I'll interrupt this to say that I just got a message from Heather. We met at Sukkot. Heather is looking for a new job. She's actually applying for a job right now at Hobby Lobby. That's good. You're to hold a set apart convocation on Hag HaMatzot, feats of unleavened you are to rest on the seventh day of Hag HaMatzot, Feast of Unleavened Bread. Parenthetically, you're not supposed to work on either the first or the seventh day of Hag HaMatzot, unleavened bread. And an uncircumcised male is not to eat the Pesach offering. There are temple requirements listed by Ezekiel for a property built yet. It's also been discusses that people going into it must be circumcised in both body and flesh. So during the readings today, we saw that we are to celebrate Passover as a perpetual statute. But here's the question I'm going to pose to you. It's a little bit different than that. Is, are we eating the Pesach offering during a Passover or Pesach celebration here in Latin America? That answer is no. We are not eating the Pesach offering. There, as one of the men at prison pointed out last night, he said he has read sources discussing having a Passover Seder service at a congregation, that the discussion or statement was kind of as a subtext was that we're having lamb, our Seder, but this lamb isn't the Passover. It's not the Pesach. It wasn't slaughtered appropriately at the appropriate location. It's not slaughtered in Jerusalem, so to speak, at this point. And that is true in that, I've seen that myself. Congregations that have served lamb have pointed out that this is like the Passover in that it's the right kind of animal, but it's not the actual Passover itself. A lot of congregations, when they serve Passover meals, will not serve lamb just to make sure that no one thinks that they are serving the Passover. And that's why beef brisket is one of the most popular congregational Passover meals. We've known, well, at least a couple of people that have truly believed that they were supposed to do the Passover slaughter themselves. One was a guy at the time was in California, and another was in Texas. That proposed, that said, really thought they should be doing and did slaughter lambs, and thought that we were doing the right thing by calling it a Passover offering.
I'm going to question. We can do the service part of it and still not call it, we're not actually doing the Passover, we're celebrating, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
We're getting as close as we can. So why then can you not kill an animal and just say, we're not doing the real sacrifice, we're just getting as close as we can?
You could.
Okay.
I mean, in Israel, that's what has frequently been done with the Temple Mount Faithful. They have slaughtered a lamb at the cornerstone that was set for where the temple would be, or at least where the cornerstone was located, trying getting as close as possible to.
Are we supposed to be doing that? Not in Jerusalem.
Well, they're in Jerusalem. Temple Mount Faithful is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still on us.
Oh,
Can we do that and say we're getting as close as we can and still not be violating? Hey, we do that there.
Well, it would be considered a rehearsal. Same thing goes for the other rehearsals we do for the festivals. I mean, Sukkot is the same thing. there are offerings that are supposed to be done during Sukkot that we're not bringing. We are doing something to celebrate, but it's not
Then I
actual.
hear a lot of people say, well, who told you got to celebrate? If you can't do it, if God cut it off, then you cut it off.
That is a commonly raised question. You could ask a follow-up question, as asking, following up questions with questions, is when the temple was destroyed, when the first temple, when David's temple, or really Solomon's temple rather, was destroyed, they were not able to celebrate or to actually have a Passover offering then either. Was it some? Well, why did they start it again afterwards? Because they're following the instructions.
Well, they're supposed to do it in the temple or in the land?
It's at
In Jerusalem.
It's at the place he sets, the place of his choosing.
Place meaning,
Well,
not necessarily the temple.
it's been at the tabernacle or the temple where they're doing it, and it looks like they did it at the tabernacle during the Passover in the wilderness. There was only that one Passover they celebrated in the wilderness.
So they set up ovens in the temple to handle the masses of sacrifices.
Not ovens, they didn't cook it there.
Well, however they did it.
They slaughtered them there, but then they cooked it at their tent site.
Sorry.
No, that's
I can see where a lot of things, not necessarily that, people do, thinking they're doing God's will, when you can almost say, no, they're not, they're making kind of a mockery of it.
yeah. Well, I've seen the question might be, well, for eating the Passover, you're not to let it remain to the next day. So it would be, and Facebook comment, we got to eat lamb the first day. We don't leave nothing for the next day. In other words, you don't leave that meat over for the next day. As a comment here. So that is true in that as a rehearsal, you could not eat the meat afterwards, as a, if you will, a rehearsal, particularly I guess if it's lamb. But again, the meat that we're eating outside of the land, outside of a functioning tabernacle, is
not the real Passover.
Is not the real Passover, because the Passover, remember, is the lamb itself. And if you can't bring the lamb to the tabernacle or to the temple, it is a celebration of it. And just like we celebrate a lot of things that can't be done currently without a functioning altar or priesthood, something that can be, you can get as close to it as possible.
Remember who even said to do that?
Yeah, there's no commandment to do that. That is correct. I think that there is a command. Certainly, there's a command to not eat leavened bread during that week.
Those usually are qualified by saying wherever you live.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I don't know if we saw that particular phraseology. We did see the command to chapter 12, verse 14. This will be a day for you to remember and to celebrate as a festival to Adonai. From generation to generation, you are to celebrate it by a perpetual regulation. So it does seem that it is perpetually something that we are to celebrate.
But isn't that one of the feasts you're supposed to go to Jerusalem?
Well, it's where you bring your lamb to the place where you set. Yes. Well, Passover is not technically a pilgrimage feast, but Hag HaMatzah
Well, it's
is.
right
So
there.
yeah,
You're gonna be there for
can't. Yeah, you've got to be there for the previous night. Be there for the whole thing. Yeah. And you have to get there on Passover so that you're not basically working on Hag HaMatzot.
I'm not saying celebrating something and saying, oh, this isn't the real thing we're celebrating isn't bad,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it can morph into something bad. You start putting your own little traditions with it over centuries.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would ask it is, okay, would it be a sin not to do it? If you couldn't, if there was no temple, you couldn't go to Jerusalem, would it be a sin not to do it?
Well, it says this would be a day for you to celebrate as a festival to Adonai for generation to generation, as you celebrate it by perpetual regulation. There's not a location given in that particular statement.
No, but we know later it was changed from the first one wasn't in the Holy Land at Jerusalem.
Right.
So later it was changed to it's got to be done here. The killing of it is supposed to be done there, and the eating of it.
Well, because if things are going right, it's all going together in the sense that everyone is going to Jerusalem or wherever the tabernacle is set up.
Yeah, they're going to be there.
They're going to be there, so it's not really. It's in the wilderness. It wasn't an issue. When they got into the land, then it was a long walk from Galilee, for example, down to Jerusalem. But it seems that just by the statement that you're to celebrate it for generation to generation, doesn't say wherever you are, but as long as there are generations, it seems like you're to celebrate it.
As long as there's the place you're supposed to celebrate it. It doesn't have to say that, a location right there. It's already given the rules. But now we can't follow those rules.
Well, we can follow part of it. I mean, we certainly can avoid leaven, and we can eat unleavened and avoid leaven. That doesn't matter where you are. I think you can keep the unleavened bread part of it, even if the Passover can't be slaughtered in accordance with the regulation.
That's what I'm saying. If you don't, you can. That shows solidarity, maybe even with them. But if you don't, it don't sound like you're sinning. You're not breaking a command.
Well, it is in chapter 12, verse 14. This will be a day for you to remember and to celebrate. So if you don't remember the day or celebrate the day, then it does seem like it's violating what he said to do.
Celebrating means doing it according to the rules, the way that he set up to do it, to celebrate it.
I would say that would be the difference between keeping it and celebrating it. You can't keep it, but you can celebrate it.
Okay. In my mind, they're the same. You keep it by celebrating. But
well, what we do with the remembrance of it is we remember. That's what the Seder and the Haggadah helps us. The Haggadah is the telling. The Haggadah helps us to keep the command of part that says this would be a day for you to remember, and that brings it to mind what happened on that, and that is part of the mitzvah, I think, of keeping it. Facebook comment says, we can retell the story to keep the memory fresh so that each generation knows the story. Someday there will be a temple. But I agree with you, that is a commonly held as a point of, I guess, I don't know another way to say it, but maybe Christian triumphalism, saying, look, we have abolished your festivals.
Yeah, that's not where I'm coming from.
No, I'm not saying you're coming from that. I'm saying I've heard that idea more than once.
Getting as close as you can to celebrating it. Okay?
To keeping it. Again, I'm gonna
keeping it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then why do we let uncircumcised men come in and keep it with us? We could get a little closer to the real thing by not letting them.
We could. But
so where do we draw that line?
Well, what is if you don't allow uncircumcised people into the Lawton congregation, you're not allowing them to keep the mitzvah to remember it. And
I'm not putting the location of it anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world, if you don't allow them to come into a Passover service in which there is, again, a celebration of Passover, not the actual Passover.
But I'm talking about getting as close as you can to doing the real thing as if you were in the land. Well,
true. Even that, you could say that, but by what is the greater weight? To get as close as you can to doing it, or to allow someone else to keep a mitzvah to remember it?
I would say go as close as you can to doing it.
I would say to help someone else keep the mitzvah to remember it, because you know that you're not keeping it anyway.
What about remembering that you're supposed to be circumcised?
We read it. It's in the Haggadah.
But you don't have to do it.
We don't have a checker. I'm not going to bring a checker in to do that. You're not actually keeping the Passover.
Okay, so we don't have to do it no matter what.
Don't do what?
We don't have to follow all the rules that were set down for it.
We can't follow all the rules that were set down for us.
But we can that.
We could, but then we would keep people out who aren't circumcised, that can't keep the mitzvah.
People out there in the land who aren't circumcised.
In the land.
Yeah. So why can't we do something in the land or out here that we can't do in the land, and vice versa? If we're indeed trying to get as close as we can to walking it out. Just thoughts.
So these were the plagues from Torah portion Va'era and Torah portion Bo. Sorry, I missed Earl's comment. And in the kingdom, when we bring the Passover lamb in, we will look up at Messiah, the Passover lamb, remember what he did right. So these are a smattering of the deities. It's kind of hard to read on the screen, just too small print there. And I'm not 100% certain that the listing of these deities were the ones chosen to be mocked. We do know that Egypt's deities were mocked, and they had a lot of them to mock. As I say, the little note down the bottom, there are other formulations of this list, as the Torah does not name the gods being humbled or mocked. So here are a couple of the ones we're looking at here from the first plague. So the Egyptian deities and their symbols. Here's one for frogs. Gnats, deity of order, harmony, and balance. Arov, swarms. They're profane deities. This one is often depicted with his male organ protruding. Cattle blight. Boils. Hail. Sometimes depicted as chaos or as a cow in these two different examples. Locusts. Darkness. And death of the firstborn. So darkness also comes in. We see it as a future event as well. Darkness and locust have a different order of events in Revelation chapter 9. So how will Israel leave Egypt? How will Israel leave Mitzrayim? One of the things that we can see is that just the words, we've kind of talked about this before, but it's not just, the letting go versus driving you out. It really is intensification. So in this first one, it's a let you go. It's an intensification. When it's these cases of letting go in Shemot 11:1. Yishalach is a intensification of to send, so you're being sent, intensify, being sent or pushed out. Because Shalko, when he sends you out, when he lets you go, so to speak, it's the same root word, shalach, and being driven out altogether is altogether is a kala, and then yagresh, and you see it, Geresh, Yeresh, the repetition of the words indicating that you're being really driven out. Again, the kala in there altogether. So it's intensification in the verb forms or intensification by repetition. And so Israel will be driven out when they leave, or when we leave, because we see it. We saw at the end of at the end of our reading, it said essentially, on that day you tell your son is because of what Adonai did for me when I left Egypt. That's in 13 verse 9, which would you could transpose that, or not transpose. You could add yourself to that, me. So we would say, on that day you're to tell your son is because of what Adonai did for me, Wayne, when I left Egypt. Or put your own name in that sentence. Here's how Art Scroll looks at it. Art Scroll commentary kind of looks at it as asking kind of these questions of how will Israel leave Egypt? It says they will not simply be allowed to leave, they will be forcibly sent out. They'll be completely sent out from Egypt. I want to highlight, that that Israel is being called the people frequently. Speak now in the hearing of the people. And I've shown this before. We've talked about this before, but there are a lot of different people in different languages that have called themselves the people in their own language. These are all, of course, taken from Native American groups. So my comment there at the side is Ha'am, the people, is a very tribal designation. The people. So the Targums are always interesting to take a look at. In the synagogues of the ancient times, Aramaic Targums are read alternately with the Torah and prophets, verse by verse, so people would understand what was meant by the Hebrew text. So we could do that. We can emulate that. We actually do it more. We Targum more than they did, in the sense that we typically read a very little Hebrew and all in English, so the people understand what's being said. So here's an interesting way that looks like it's a little bit, the screen's a little bit off, looks like, but the phraseology, in other words, it has Yud Vav Yud is how the Targum Onkelos depicts the divine name. It says, yet one plague I will bring upon Pharaoh and upon Mitzrayim, after which he will send you a hence. When sending away, he will thoroughly driving will drive you. So you can see that's clearly, when you look at the underlying Aramaic, it's a repetition of that. And in the Targum of 11 verse 4, about midnight, I'm going out into the midst of Mitzrayim. The Targum reads similarly. It says, at the dividing of the night, I'll be revealed in the midst of Mitzrayim. And the words there for revealed are very much of a Semitic context. Gilyana, revelation, is in Aramaic, and Galut is the Hebrew of that for Revelation, the book of Revelation. So there is a revealing that will be done. You can see that Mitgale, the Hebrew of the phrase will be revealed, is related. You can see the similarity with Gilyana, which is the Aramaic text, and Het Galut, which is the Hebrew name for the book of Revelation. You can see that there is some some overlap there. So the 10th plague, this is how Targum Jonathan discusses the 10th plague. It's, if you will, the Targum adds to the text so that the reader understands what is being said here. It doesn't hold things back. It was in the dividing of the night of the 15th that the word of Yud, again, this Targum Jonathan versus Onklos, they use substitutes for the divine name, but different ones, slew all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh, who would have sat upon the throne of his kingdom, to the firstborn sons of the kings who were captives in the dungeon as hostages under Pharaoh's hand, and who, for having rejoiced at the servitude of Israel, were punished as the Egyptians, Mitzrahi. And all the firstborn of the cattle that did the work of the Mitzrahi died also. So one of the criticisms that I read about the Jeremiah prophecy that we read is that it says that Pharaoh and the kings were were going to be beaten by Nebuchadnezzar. So what the Targum points out that there were not in there. What the criticism is that, well, Egypt has only had one king, Pharaoh. So this is obviously something wrong here. Well, when you see that, this says the firstborn sons of the kings were held captives in Pharaoh's dungeon, and they rejoiced against Israel. So perhaps that's the same sort of thing going on, years later after Exodus has occurred, with the prophecy of Jeremiah, talking about pharaohs and their kings, or his kings, these are the same perhaps groups of people that were rejoicing at Israel's demise, and there still may have been kings in Egypt that were also being rejoicing, but there were also kings that were not necessarily Egyptian kings, but still were kings in Pharaoh's house, so to speak. Anyway, the mixed multitude, the Erev Rav, as it's in the Hebrew text, Erev Rav, it has two parts to it. There's never a time afterwards that the mixed multitude is called Egyptians or something else. They're a mixed multitude who left with them. They weren't necessarily Israelites, and they left Egypt along with with everybody else leaving. And so they're welcomed, or at least allowed to do so, but they didn't always bring Israel a lot of joy because of, for example, the incident of the quails that caused a lot of death among Israelites, because it was the mixed multitude who were essentially rebelling or egging on or causing grumbling within the ranks. Or the leading grumblers were from the mixed multitude. This is what I was reading earlier from verse 8. On that day you will tell your son is because of what Adonai did for me when I left Egypt. So in 13, verse 9, the next verse after this, more of it will serve you as a sign on your hand, as a reminder in your eyes, so that Adonai's Torah may be on your lips, because with a strong hand, Adonai brought you out of Egypt. So in what way will the Exodus, or leaving Egypt, be a sign in the manner described there? This certainly reminds me of tefillin is would be the clear um, physical reminder here. The idea of it is so that the Torah is on your lips, in your thoughts, in your mouth, so to speak. Here's how the Chabad Chumash discusses that. It says, the exodus shall then be a sign for you to wear the single compartment tefillin on your left arm, and a reminder when you wear the multiple compartment tefillin on your forehead above the point exact between your eyes, so the Torah of God will be on your lips. For with a mighty hand God brought you out of Egypt. I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, that is again for the Chabad Chumash. I do see the certain connection between that, but it doesn't necessarily say that when you wear the tefillin, you're remembering the Exodus per se. But I can see how you could draw that out. Here's kind of an example of somebody wearing tefillin and reading, and perhaps from Hikalut, which says, then I looked, and there was a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. So I guess it depends on which particular verses you have in your tefillin that would fulfill that, if that's the case. Well, Dixie wants to know, what are your questions? That's not what she wants to know. She wants to know why you're bothering her. She's trying to sleep. All right. Let's go ahead and close that. I would thank you for allowing us to discuss your word. I would thank you for the blessings that you give us. I would thank you for the many wisdom or the many insights you've given and the wisdom you've imparted. We thank you in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen and amen.